3, 2, 1. You're good.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is a special episode, a very unique one. We're joined by Mark Karwan, a Praxair professor in operations, SUNY distinguished teaching professor, retired after 46 years, Department of Industrial Systems Engineering at UB. And he is joining us because, and we'll let him explain, every Bills fan, every NFL fan, it's like Christmas morning when the NFL schedule comes out, and somebody has to help put that together with a crazy amount of variables that, again, I have a list of them here that we're going to talk about. But Mark, thanks for joining us, and please fill in the gaps of I'm sure I missed a lot.
Oh, well, thank you, and I'm so glad to be here, Don and Josh. Going back a little bit, so my field of operations research is the field that does things like logistics, supply chain, the mathematics and computer use for scheduling, for coordination of teams of drones for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance missions. I mean, that's just logistics in the air, okay? But also scheduling of doctors and nurses into suites for health maintenance organizations. I mean, basically it's mathematics for decision making. Even what house should you buy? I mean, it's the mathematics of decision making. And there's no harder problem, honestly, than scheduling of the NFL. Okay.
Wow.
People say, well, how complicated it could be. Well, they used to do it by hand. And they did it by hand until about 2002. And then they started using computers in some way, form, or another. Now, computers have tremendously evolved in the last 20, 21, 22 years to be a lot faster, have a lot more memory, be able to do things that took hours you can do in seconds. But this problem, they have to use a couple thousand computers, 12 hours a day for over 3 months in order to get the schedule that will be the best. Let's take the Buffalo Bills. Why not, right?
Yeah.
Let's suppose they only played 5 games. Well, which of their 5 games do they play first? That's a choice of 5. What's the choice of the next 4? The combination of those 2 is 5 times 4. It's 20. And then times 3 times 2 times 1. Well, when you have 17 choices for the first game, is it home or away with the Jets? Is it just Pittsburgh this year, played there or here, whatever the rules are? Well, it's 17 times 16 times 15 times 14. There's over, and when you put in the bye week of about 10 choices, it's over 3.4 quadrillion orders that the Bills could play. And that's only the Bills.
Yeah, times 31.
Those other teams, and those things have to mesh. They have to, you take the current schedule, you change one game. Instead of Bills playing Miami in week 4, they're going to play Miami in week 5. Well, what was Miami playing in week 5? And who were they playing in week 4? And the whole schedule pretty much has to change to accommodate that.
This is remarkable.
Before I ask a question, I need to know your mathematical formula for decision making. Can you send a couple of my friends some tips on dating and who to choose as a mate? Because they could definitely use some help.
You actually there's a field of multi-criteria decision making, which I also am one of the leaders in. And in that field, you list all the criteria, you list your constraints. You have to come up with a way of weighting or using the criteria, because you can't have the best of everything.
Right.
And that goes with the NFL as well. You can't have every team that has a bye week playing somebody else that had a bye week the same week. Because if you try to do that, you'll get no schedules that work because of things like 30%, 20 to 40% of the stadiums are blocked due to a concert of Taylor Swift. A few years ago, the Pope was in Philadelphia. You have NASCAR in town. You can't do both at the same time. You got the Rose Bowl or whatever, college games. So there are so many stadium blocks that you can never make, quote, the special, the perfect schedule. Everybody playing every other week or whatever, at home and away. So we've worked with Mike North, the vice president for NFL broadcasting and scheduling and all those things, and Charlotte Carey, the NFL director of broadcasting. They've come here 3 times and spoke to our students. Very special for us. In fact, 2 years ago, Mike actually stayed for a night game against New England, primetime game, the one in the snow that we lost because like 7-3 or whatever. I mean, it's terrible.
Wind,
Nobody could move on the field, the wind. And he was in an auditorium 12 talking about the game as it went, and at the intermission talking about how they schedule. So at halftime, how to schedule. So it was very cool for our faculty students who came and saw it. And he's spoken up to 400 students in our largest classroom at UB, the freshman one of the years.
Wow.
Which, because their method fits the engineering decision-making process, which we can talk about later.
Can you tell people how you got involved with the NFL? Like how the genesis of this with Doug Whaley and the Bills and the bye week, and Don was there at the time. I know you shared with me how the Bills reached out to you and how you guys kind of convinced the NFL that you were needed.
Okay. Well, it turns out the Bills did not reach out to us. Okay. But we read the newspaper.
Okay. Fair enough.
And to read the newspaper, you actually turn pages. Like our students think you just swipe it, because they don't have any. I'm kidding, but because everything's a device. But what happened was we had a senior undergraduate, and that senior undergraduate was interested in doing an independent study in something to do with sports, and so another professor gave him some papers on scheduling and mathematical scheduling in soccer. Because the soccer leagues all do different types of rules, whether it's round robin or you play like NFL or whatever you do. And they've used math for that, and it's not as complicated as the NFL for years. So he gave him those papers, and that same week, it was Russ Brandon, I remember, the Bills president, Russ Brandon in 2013, was in the newspaper talking about the disadvantage the Bills had in 2013. He said, and this is a quote, "It's a little bit disappointing that we've had 6 games where teams are coming off a bye or a long week. Thursday, then they don't play for another 10 days the next Sunday. This is the second time we're playing the Jets coming off a Thursday night game, and now we're playing them coming off a bye." And so you had this idea of competitive imbalance due to rest period. So Kyle Cunningham, the senior, and then Neeru Pandey, who's a PhD student at the time with a lot of programming experience, worked with myself and Murat Kurt, who was a professor for a few years at UB and went on to an industry job. And we came up with a mathematical model of how to have this alleviate competitive imbalance. Well, our work was presented. There were 200 research papers presented in 2015 to the Sloan MIT Sports Analytics Conference. 200 sent in. They chose 8 to actually be delivered. And then that conference has, people that design stadiums, a group of players, people in the high offices of the NFL or whatever, doing different talks on different things.
Do you remember what year that was?
That was 2015.
2015, you said, okay.
2015. And what's funny is, to me, in that our paper wasn't so much analytics. The analytics were fairly simple. The research group that won the analytics that year, and it might have been 2 teams that shared that. One of them was, the sports leagues now capture everything. Every pitch, every pitcher-catcher combination. And their study was on who were the best framers, which catchers were the best framers, which pitchers had the pitches that were most frameable, and which combination of pitchers and catchers. So they're analyzing every pitch of every game. And that's tremendous analytics. What we did was some analytics we'll talk about, but then a lot of it was scheduling, which is not analytics. It's mathematical methods of trying to create a schedule. But so Russ Brandon looked at that. Now, the Bills' complaints, again, they had 5 games against rested opponents. 3 were divisional. That's 2013. In 2013, the Chiefs, Patriots, who we know pretty well, and the Saints had no games against rested opponents. The schedule is hard to make up, very hard. Mike North calls it finding the one grain of sand. And there are lots of grains of sand in the ocean. But when I told you that one team creates more than 3.4 quadrillion possibilities for one team, okay? It's not just the grains of sand. Physicists estimate there's 10 to the 52nd atoms on Earth. Okay, 10 times 10 times 10. And in the unit, when you multiply by 10, things get big quickly. The universe supposedly only has about 10 to the 82nd. When you look at the possibilities for the zeros and ones in the NFL schedule, it's over 2 to the 300th. Okay?
Wow.
More than the atoms in the universe. and most of them fail.
Wow.
They don't create a playable schedule. So the math and the computers are intense to try to find good games. Mike will tell you, and he has videos all over the web because people interview him and put them up, and he talks freely to everybody. Great guy. That the schedules that used to, people complain about schedules all the time, but the schedules that used to come out were terrible. If you really looked at them, he'd say. And then even in the early 2000s when they started using computers. But you can't do this by hand. As I mentioned, you change one game, it all changes. They used to have a big board. They still have it in their room where they do the computers and do the work. And they have the tags they used to put up. And one person was so experienced by it, he could come up with a schedule, forget his name. But we started in 2015. We were the ESPN fan favorite. Our paper wasn't the most analytical, but it was the fan favorite. The Sloan conference has people vote on their top, the 8 research papers they like, which one they like best. So being the ESPN fan favorite, we got ESPN News, Ohio State Radio called us, sports radio. We were on TV, not like this, but we were covered in LA and all over the country. You could cure cancer, you would not get as much interest as if you did. Okay, and I've learned that. I've got well over 100 publications, lots of research money from National Science Foundation, Navy, Air Force, others, Praxair, do all kinds of things. Saved Praxair over $50 million, and that was 10 years ago. And you don't get, that's nothing compared to if you can get a better schedule. But what happened was some of the analytics we did between 2002 and 2014, the Bills had the worst metric against rested opponents. We played 29 games against more rested opponents. 19 were coming off their bye week, and the other 10 off a Thursday. They had 10 days rest instead of 2 weeks. The Patriots had 19. They had 10 less. The Bengals had only 14. They had the least. Okay, and it's like a straight line anywhere from 14 to 29 games in that period, and we were the number one. So not good. So what happened was, when you have something notable, like something notable happens at Roswell Park, a new treatment, or you're on ESPN as the fan favorite for research paper, not exactly the same, but the UB media people picked that up, and the NFL picked it up. Well, the NFL media person called UB's media person and said, does Dr. Karwan want to talk to Mike North? Oh my God, yes, that was great. We had a fabulous 1-hour conversation, and that began a relationship that over the next, say, 3 years, immediately he sent us the stadium block. We thought we found it was a blind squirrel finding a nut, but we've worked with them since and worked on different issues with them.
You've obviously, reinforced your value with them. Having worked with the league office when I was at the Bills, a couple things struck me. It's the biggest, most successful sports league in the world, but I always was impressed by the fact that they had an openness to listen to people. Maybe that's why part of the reason they were so great. Their egos weren't so big. Another funny thing too was that being there on Park Avenue, I would go maybe once a year or so. A lot of those people were from New York City, and they would openly talk about who the Jets and Giants were going to play that weekend and what their chances were. They were fans of those teams, and they didn't try to hide it. But there were, so to whatever extent there was a subjective process in the schedule making, what you helped alleviate was the appearance of bias
to a lot of things. They keep track in a spreadsheet. When was the last time a team had a 3-game road trip? And now, and what is the bye week history in terms of when they had their bye week? Mm-hmm. Some teams want to have it early, some later, but they try to average over the years, so it ends up in about the middle on average. So everybody's moving around. Long road trips. Starting the season 2 games away from home. They keep track of many of these things. And then I'll talk about the penalties. You can have in the math a rule that says you can't do it. Okay. You can't give Green Bay a 3-game road trip because 3 years in a row they had one. Well, that's not true, but example. Mm-hmm. and they just can't have one. Others, well, they haven't had a 3-game road trip in 8 years. You don't care. It's fine. If they get it, they get it. Somebody's got to get it. Usually it's 4 or 5 teams a year, because the only way the schedule is going to work is stadium blocks and other things.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can put a penalty. So, well, they had it 2 years ago. Let's put a 50-point penalty on that. They started away from home, 2 games away from home for the last year. We're going to put a 100-point penalty on that. And you try to generate schedules that have the fewest total number of penalty points. So what they actually do, now here's the other problem. I mentioned how big this mathematical model is and how hard it is. Literally, if you did a computation, which you can do, our sun would grow cold before you could solve the problem using the best supercomputers in the world if you tried to solve the whole problem. Like I mentioned, how constraints grow quickly. 3 games in a row, road games in a row. You got to do it for weeks 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5 for all these teams. You end up with over 100,000 or hundreds of thousands of conditions. So what you do is you put penalties on things you want to penalize, and you put in lots of conditions, and overnight you let 1,500 or 2,000 computers run. Now, when I say run, here's the problem. I mentioned the sun growing cold. If you put the whole problem in, it will not ever come back with an answer. So you need to seed the schedule. If there's 200, it used to be 256 games, and now we went to 17 games a year. So it's like 280 games. There's more games, but you can't, the model won't solve if you try to solve it all at once. So you have to seed, you have to choose about 50 games first. And at 45 to 55 or 60 games, you have to choose those and then see what you get. Try to finish the schedule.
Are those typically like are those like the opener or the Thanksgiving Day games? Are those like the ones that the league sets?
Great question. So that'll be the Super Bowl team plays the Thursday for the Sunday schedule, and then who's going to be their opponent? When is their opponent going to be by luck? They happen to be playing them again, so this is a Super Bowl rematch. There was potential for a Super Bowl rematch when Atlanta lost the Super Bowl at the end with New England, the great comeback. And so they were going to play New England the next year. The AFC East happened to be playing the NFC South. So they could have chosen that game. Atlanta said, no, thank you. We have a new stadium and we want to open, our home opener should be, the first game should be at our home opener. So different requests. Right?
Sure.
But otherwise, it's like, we can pick that. Let's pick Thanksgiving. But what they do is any good fan, you guys would be great. You can look at the schedule because we know who's going to have to play who once the Super Bowl is over. But pick the top, what you think, maybe the top 50 or 60 games. Those ought to be Sunday, the primetime National 425 game, Sunday night, Monday night. So you can make a pool of the potential primetime games. And then which is bigger than exactly what you need. And then let the computer, then you randomly choose, or you have a way to choose, I'm going to put those into the schedule somehow. And you can try billions of combinations of those. Okay, there's too many combinations. But you try a set of combinations, a different combination for each of the 1,500 computers. You put them to work. The computer could come back in 3 minutes and says, because of the math we do, it's impossible. Or that won't work. Or it may go 10 hours and say, you know what? There's no way to complete that physically. It just depends on how hard that is.
So during the process, when these penalties came up, when you were in your office, did you throw yellow flags just for fun?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Well, that's what happens. That's a great analogy because suppose they let the 1,500 computers run overnight. They use Amazon Web Services up in the cloud. They don't have to own all these computers. And if your computer goes down, it doesn't matter. Amazon Web Services throws another one on you. So you don't have to maintain all that. Maybe in the morning, out of those 1,500 computers, and if one of the computers says this seeding of these primetime games doesn't work, you can't finish the schedule feasibly, it randomly generates another one or picks another one and keeps trying until the next morning. Out of all those computers, you might try 200,000 different versions of primetime sets, and then 5 of them end up with feasible schedules. 5 of them. You're lucky to get 4 to 6 to 7. So then now you have to look at those. So Mike North, Charlotte Carey, they usually have one or two other people that these are the two longest serving in that job, younger people. They look at it and go, this one has potential. It might be the leader in the clubhouse, which is the best we've got so far. But, oh boy, this ended up, we couldn't put every rule in. So this ended up with Seattle traveling twice to the East Coast, too far, twice in a row. So we're going to put a big penalty on that and run it again tonight. When they get something they really think they like, they show it to Howard Katz. And eventually it goes to the commissioner. And Howard says, I don't like it. And like, why? Well, I don't know. I mean, I do know because I have a feel and I don't. They can look at the schedule, which is a color-coded spreadsheet with the colors represent the network, CBS or Fox or whatever, NBC, ABC. They represent home or away. Is it an open with a square color around it, or is it white with the color around it, home or away? You know, the team by the week. And they're so they glance at that picture and they go, oh, that doesn't look so good over here, over there, or whatever. And they do have the analytics. Is that which teams are playing how many games coming off a bye week or a road trip of 3 games? That'll pop out automatically. They have analysis. And they go, okay, we need to penalize that more or that more. Send it back. So it's like 24/7. Now that the schedule's released in May, it gives them, instead of mid-April, it's more like mid to late May. They start right after the Super Bowl. So you have February, March, April, and part of May. You have about 3.5 months for a couple thousand computers every day, every night.
A couple of questions related to that. How many computing hours do you estimate, overall it takes to put the schedule together?
Oh my gosh. Let's do a very simple calculation.
No. That's on you.
Well, no, that's okay. Suppose they do have to look at the results. So there's 12 hours that they're running the computers essentially. And they've been adding computers over the years, but I'll just say it's 1,500 computers. And then you do that for 3.5 months, which would be 135 days. Okay. Now, that is 2.4 million computer hours.
Wow.
Okay. And they do it because, they could find a schedule. They find schedules that are playable.
Sure.
Right. And they can find a playable schedule, in mid-February, end of February. But they want to do better than that. They don't want these inequities. They want the best fan experience. For example, they don't want to put all the divisional games, say the Bills, Jets, and Patriots. They play each other twice, of course, in Miami, and they're all in the first half of the season. That'd be terrible.
Yeah.
You want to spread the divisional games out. If possible, the rules change, but I think in the recent years it's been the last day of the season you play a divisional game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Right.
There's been changes to the Thursday night rules. Every team has to play a Thursday night. Started maybe 2014. Mike is great at saying we want every team to be upset at the same level. They're all mad at us.
That's funny.
Schedule, but let's try to keep it even. That nobody should be overly upset.
So once they kind of hand select, or I guess you kind of like put a scaffolding up, right, of like these 50 games or whatever that then get fed into the main computer. How many like there's never an optimal schedule, but how many what does it get narrowed down to? Is there, say, 10 schedules that they then pick between at the end? Like how narrow does it get, and then how long is the process before they pick like the ultimate winner?
Right. Well, they go down. They really can go right down to the wire. They could pick the ultimate winner a day or two before it's announced. And I forget which year, the last few, they found their best schedule like 2 days before or something. Okay, because they don't stop. They keep trying. And so the penalties come out. Suppose this year they're working on a schedule and it's a penalty of 2,300 points. And then you improve on it with a penalty of 1,900. Well, that's going to be better. But how do you compare schedules that are popping out at 1,900, 1,890, 1,910? I mean, the penalty points are a little arbitrary. Is it a 100-point penalty or a 50-point penalty for this or that? So they'll look at those schedules very carefully and try to use, obviously, they and then Howard Katz and the commissioner from What's in New York.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. they'll have to choose. Like when we started with them, Green Bay had not had a road game of their first two since 1924. Okay. Everybody else had one in the 2000s or 1997, whatever. And you go, why is that? It's not because they tried to. It's because Green Bay has 0 stadium blocks. 0. Okay. The Bills typically have 0. Okay. And it make the schedule playable because they're willing to play 2 games at home to start, which everybody would like to do. But there was reasons. It was just the math, and it was because they're so open. Where St. Louis Rams, okay, remember the Rams in St. Louis? They blocked 8 of the 17 Sundays. That owner's making money on other stuff. That's unfair to the other owners. It made the schedule hard to do. So then they moved to LA. That's great. Oh, wait a minute. That's bad. Because now East Coast, West Coast travel restrictions. At least before they were, quote, in the middle or the eastern third of the country. And travel was anybody can go to St. Louis in a sense. Not such a big trip. So you change one problem for another. But anyway.
The variables are amazing. Before we came on, I was reading one of your documents, and I just jotted some down, all the things that have to be taken into account. You got the bye, London, consecutive road games, distance Thursday game, late season, networks, 1 p.m. games. But then you mentioned, concerts and the Pope.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it's funny how if a team... sorry, Pope or Metallica, you can't come here. There's already going to be an NFL game. And then you mentioned the request by the teams with, say, Atlanta, they wanted to play their first game in the new stadium, which seems reasonable. So the league asks the teams, hey, obviously we can't grant you every request you have, but send them to us and we'll consider them. And then they get baked in before the schedule's made.
Sure, some of them, the reasonable ones, can be baked in with penalty points. Like if you don't do that, we're going to give ourselves, the NFL schedulers, a 50-point penalty. But if that's the only way we can play it, we're going to play it. I mean, we can't. And then you have things like Major League Baseball, where they project that. Obviously, they knew Tampa Bay was going to be 24-5 or whatever they are now. No, but and the Yankees would be at 500 or less. But they try to take the MLB schedule comes out first. And so that's made up first. So they try to take that into consideration to avoid major conflicts. But you mentioned the NFL. They don't beat Metallica or the Pope, but they do beat the MLB. If it has to happen, MLB has to reschedule or move their venue. It has never happened. But the NFL is first, and the MLB knows that. It's an agreement somehow. So, but, because you don't know who's going to be in what series. And is Boston going to make the playoffs, the wild card, the 5-game series, the 1 game, the 7-game series. And so they do what they can with that to try to avoid those conflicts, but because they have to guess and project, and they've never had a problem. But if they did, it's absolutely in concrete. The NFL would take precedence, and Major League Baseball would have to move the game another day, another time, or whatever. And so there's 2 reasons that you need good games on Sunday. Okay, we mentioned you guys are good fans. You could pick the primetime games. I said, this would be a good game. That'd be a good game. We need to put Aaron Rodgers and the Jets early in the season against the Bills, because what if Aaron is old and tanks? So we can't wait till week 10 and 18. Okay, we got to get him in there somewhere early, and hopefully a primetime game, because everybody in the country is going to be interested in Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, and of course the Bills. So we've been doing a lot of analytics for what makes you watch the 1 and 4 o'clock game. Okay. And this is pretty darn interesting to me. What happens at 1 o'clock? So, for example, the Bills are not playing at 1 o'clock. Who in Buffalo is going to watch 1 o'clock football? Well, is it a good game or not? Does it matter? Do we just have people that watch whatever? So in Buffalo, it turns out that if we're playing on a different day, or we're playing at 1 o'clock instead of 4 o'clock, turns out the average viewership for the other game where we're not playing at that time is pretty much a steady. The average is about between 75 and 80,000, almost no matter who plays. Okay, it will range between the high 50s and the low 90s, but an average of about 75, 78, no matter who plays. It turns out, but if the Bills are playing, then the average is 230,000, not 75. And we had a maximum a couple of years ago of 311,000 in the Buffalo market.
Wow.
Detroit, then you go, well, is that true for every team? The other thing we can look at is if the Bills game is on, of the TVs, this is all the Nielsen data, still the only data that we really have. 96% of the TVs will watch the Bills game. And on the other channel, then 4% will watch something else. We're the most loyal city that way.
Really?
If you're in Detroit, it's about the same in terms of if it's a non-Lions game, they're not playing at that time. It's about 160,000 will watch. The other game, whatever it is, they're like football fans will watch. I'm saying anything. It does vary because it can go from 140 to 310, but the average is about 160. Plus Ohio. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. Okay. What about Columbus? It's halfway between Cleveland and Cincinnati on a diagonal. Turns out Columbus is almost exactly half Browns, half Bengals. You move down towards Dayton between Columbus and Cincinnati, they're strongly Cincinnati.
Yeah.
You go to Wyoming, who do they watch?
Josh Allen.
They watch Josh Allen.
Yeah.
They watch the Bills.
Right. Yeah.
Why was Omaha watches Dallas, but the number 2 team was the Browns when Baker Mayfield was with the Browns.
Yeah.
So you got all these weird factors coming into which market, which watches who and when.
Well, for as much as the networks pay, essentially the TV contract, 132nd, pays for every team's player salary. It's almost weird how it comes out so close.
Wow.
But I wonder, and this is probably not likely to ever happen again, hopefully, but when you take and think about all your algorithms and math, when the Bills were playing in Cincinnati, the game got canceled because of, the Damar Hamlin famously the situation. The big question was after, finding out Damar Hamlin was okay, obviously, but there was still thought then about, okay, who's going to either Kansas City, the Bills, and Cincinnati all could have made the case to be the number 1, 2, or 3 seeds. Do you feel like your algorithms could have helped the league come up with the fairest resolution for that? Were you thinking about that at the time when that was a question?
That was of course a very special time and a very special decision.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they did, other than agreeing with it, but other than that, which has nothing to do with it, we're all sports fans and have different ideas. But basically, for that, it's so special. I'm sure what they did is make a fairly simple list, which actually Ben Franklin is an inventor of. He invented he's actually the first person credited in multi-criteria decision making, as well as everything else. And the volunteer fire department, the library system, all this. But basically, he came up with the pros and cons. And here's all the criteria. What could happen? Here's the advantages and disadvantages of these different decisions. So there weren't too many decisions they could make that I can think of there. So you either don't play the game. If you don't play the game, then what are the ramifications, right? You have what happens in the playoffs? Would there be a home team? Who has home field advantage, etc.? How does that work? You do play the game. What day do you play it on? Given this day, what are the advantages and disadvantages? Advantages, disadvantages. So you sort of simply go through the alternatives, the pros and cons, and then they're going to make the decision. My algorithm would never make this. My algorithms would actually make that tree for them. It would just show them all the possibilities, of which there's nothing like the NFL schedule. There's not 2.4 quadrillion for one team, and they have to mesh. But our field does go through decision analysis. That's a core we teach called decision analysis, which is more how do we help you make a decision where it's not as complex as the NFL schedule, but it's basically a branching process and some algorithms to help you get to a decision.
Before we let you go here, maybe you could just maybe one more time kind of sum it up for us. You said it's the hardest problem you've ever dealt with. Is it so complex that it's unsolvable long term? Will the computing power ever get good enough where it might not take 3 months anymore?
No. It's a simple answer because, like I said, With the computers we have today, the sun would grow cold. If you put a supercomputer on every star we know, the sun would still grow cold. Okay. Before that's like 5 billion years, because of the way it works when you multiply 10 by 10 by 10 by 10 by 10, et cetera, and things grow ridiculously exponentially. So that I don't see that. The software, so the company that works with the NFL is called Optimal Planning Solutions, OPS, out of Vancouver, Canada. They provide the interface and easy way to put in all the rules and put in the penalties and do all this stuff, get a schedule out, put in more penalties, change this, write a hard constraint. And they've been working on them for some time. The software that's used for what's called mixed integer programming, yet the answers have to be zeros and ones, not continuous variables. And that's actually the way the algorithms work, is an extensive branching process, but really smart, knowing going down this branch will never work. But there's so many potential branches. Like I said, it'll never be solved without presetting some games. The software they use, there's two major competitors, and this one is called Gurobi, invented by Dr. Gu, by Robert Bixby. That's the row. It's Guru, and I forget the B. The B is Bixby. And they gave them the idea because they're open to talk to everybody. They talk to different people that have solvers, the math. And they said, well, what if you fix a bunch of games first? What if you seed the games?
Right.
And that's what led to be able to get 4 or 5 or 6 schedules every night and then have something. But you got to fix them. It'll never solve. And within our field, so I've solved problems with 10,000 variables, not 40,000, 10,000 constraints, not 100,000 or more. And it could take 3 weeks, but it solves. Okay. But this is by far the hardest thing. And like I said, we've had some of the most famous people in our field try this. One of them used to have the Major League Baseball scheduling contract. Much easier problem. He gave a talk at UB and it was great. He said he's complimented all the time because, my gosh, the Yankees are in a tight race with, well, not Baltimore lately, but Boston or Tampa Bay. And look at that. They're playing each other's series in September. It's the third weekend. Well, no, they schedule each of those divisional opponents in September so that if any of them are close, they're playing each other.
Right.
And so that was what they do. And then you're playing blocks of 3 or 4, and it's not easy, but the computer will solve it with your good mathematical modeling, solve it, and you're good. And the stadiums don't have as many conflicts.
Yeah, I've taken so much from this. Some of it makes your brain explode, but the way you've broken it down is amazing. One thing I know for sure is anytime I'm out with friends or around people who say, talk about the schedule and say, man, the way they just throw that thing together, I will vehemently disagree with them.
The sun will grow cold.
That's right.
That's my new favorite line. Yeah. The sun will grow cold before we ever solve the NFL scheduling conflict. That's a beautiful line. Mark, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and I think people will be really interested to learn things that we didn't know, and I'm assuming the vast majority of people had no idea about.
For sure.
It's been a pleasure to go talk to you guys. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thank you so much.
Right.
You take care.
Take care anytime. Okay, bye for now.
Were made, right?
Let's pivot to the NFL schedule release coming out
Christmas
next week.
Morning. This is a huge deal in the office. No matter if anyone ever downplays it, when that schedule comes out in the building, that's all anyone talks about. It's very exciting.
What did you have to do? What were your duties when it came to like schedule release day or like the days after the schedule release? What did you specifically do once the schedule was released?
There was a time where I was doing some help in arranging for the road hotels, and if it came out in April, your first game is going to be in August in the preseason, and so Gail Zielinski, Jim Overdorf, Gail Zielinski did a lot of that work. There were times where I did some help with them to solicit bids from hotels and look at their meeting space and their.
So was it always a bidding process like every year? So it wasn't a set. Does every team go to the same hotel?
No,
in the road city.
No, in fact, that's the first time I ever met Brandon Bean. There was a league meeting. I forget where. It might have been Dallas or something, but every team sends either one or two of their travel people to a city, and you meet for a day and a half, and everyone talks about the hotels they like and they don't like, which I always found curious, because anything you do in the NFL, there's some kind of competitive advantage component to it,
or perceived competitive advantage. Everybody thinks you need an edge on everything, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're talking about, I like this hotel here for this reason and that reason for travel, it's helpful information. So,
sure.
Bud, who we had on the program, no matter what it was, if you found out that someone was going to an NFL meeting, he was like, sit there, say the bare minimum. Keep your mouth shut, take a lot of notes, nod your head, pretend you're kind of playing along, but don't give them anything that helps any other team in any way.
Good advice.
Yeah, no, it was good advice. And I remember, like, some hotels in New England, no matter what, we always stayed at the Providence Marriott. And I remember we stayed there. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, and a fire alarm went off.
Amazing.
We had to evacuate the hotel.
Okay.
Coincidence? I don't think so, because we heard it happen to the Jets at the same hotel the same season.
Did every team stay at that Providence Marriott? Because the New England Stadium is really kind of out.
Yeah.
In not a rural area, but it's a tough spot, and there's just not a lot of hotel options, right?
Right.
So every team kind of stayed at that Providence Marriott.
Well, yeah, it was one of the few that had specs. It had enough meeting space. You could put the players on a couple different floors, as you know, when you stayed with the team. So the options were limited. You couldn't stay in Boston. It was just first of all, it's the same distance to Foxborough as Providence was. And even though it had a ton of hotels, it just had traffic nightmares. So
right. Okay.
Yeah.
So then schedule comes out. How did it affect, like, your personal life? Like, obviously these are going to be games where you're not going to be at home.
Yeah.
The home games are home games, but you knew right away, hey, here's 10 weekends and I'm gone.
Well, I always looked at Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Okay. Well, thankfully they weren't good enough to usually play on Thanksgiving or Christmas.
That is true. It took a while but Christmas is, what are you going to do? Sometimes if Christmas fell on a Sunday, they would have everyone play Christmas Eve. But if you're away, and New Year's a little bit, like, from a family perspective,
sure.
All right, I'm not going to be here New Year's Eve, but then really just, from a football standpoint, you're like, everyone did this. Okay, at the break after 8 games, what's our record going to be? Can you make a case for 7-1, 6-2?
It's funny because that happened in the coaches' offices too, and everybody always talks about how you play one game at a time.
That should shock people, because you're right. That mantra of one game at a time.
Oh, they all did it. They all did
right.
it. They all did. Oh, I remember we had 2 home games to start: Green Bay and Tennessee, and then it was at the Jets, and then we had 3 at the Jets, at Miami, and then Indy at home, and all this, and they were going week by week. Yeah. And this is gonna be a tough one. Nobody said we're gonna outright lose, right. But you could tell. And I remember, I think Wade said, 12-4 is looking pretty good. It wasn't 16-0, but I appreciated the fact that there was some sense of reality in there. And it wasn't. Nobody else was around, right? So you could just be real rather than the whole company line of we're going to win every game. And
they could never do that.
Right?
There would be so many. The fans would pick it apart.
Well, he caught hell later that same year because we had the 1% chance of making the playoffs going into the Monday night game at Indianapolis. And he said, realistically, we're probably out of it. And of course, that 1% chance comes true. And Indy ran the table and everything else fell correctly, and they made the playoffs.
Yep.
And if we would have run the table, we would have made the playoffs on 1% chance.
Yeah.
So, you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't, because he didn't say we're out, but he said we're basically out. And factually, he was correct. But you can't say that in public for that very reason.
That Mark Karwan that does the schedule. Yeah, he would have concurred about the statistical probability.
Yes, correct. I remember him coming in the next day and kicking himself for saying, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that." But you're honest about it. So the family considerations. Obviously, these 10 weekends are now booked, blocked off.
Right.
I feel like nowadays the road games have become more of like a destination for fans. It wasn't like that 10 years ago, right? I mean, the team wasn't as good. but it feels like the whole like travel with the Bills thing has become more of a thing over the past 5 to 10 years than it was.
Much more so. And I think a couple things. That the main thing probably is the ticket availability that just wasn't there before. Like the secondhand market,
Sure.
people, a lot of fans of a home team be like, hey, I'd like to go to the game, but I'd also like to make, triple what I spent on it. So yeah, there are way more tickets available. And
how many people like at a typical road game? Like you were in every, when you left, had you been in every active NFL stadium?
My last season was 2016, and that was the first time I ever went to Seattle.
Okay, so that was the last one. You had been to basically every other NFL stadium?
Yep, and we also played the Rams that year. So, after I left, the Rams got a new stadium.
Sure.
The team moved to Vegas. But at that point, in 2016, going to Seattle and the Rams that year, I was able to say in that window that I've been to every NFL stadium.
Which stadiums, non-division, which stadiums would have the most Bills fans in them?
Miami.
Non-division.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Like top 3. Carolina?
Yeah. You know that.
We were there.
Yeah.
Carolina felt like obviously all the transplants.
Exactly. Carolina that's a perfect one. Tampa.
Okay. Same kind of rationale.
And Jacksonville.
Okay, so the two Floridas and
Yeah.
Do you ever remember a game where Bills fans were like 50-50?
Non-division?
Yeah.
Maybe Carolina struck me as a game.
Okay.
I don't know if 50-50, but
in the division, do you feel like some of the Miami games were 50-50?
Oh yeah.
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 I remember being on the sideline and the lower deck was mostly orange, but the upper deck was all red, white, and blue.
Right.
Like it was almost all Bills fans
Yeah.
in the 300 level. You felt like the Dolphins fans would buy the 100 level tickets, but then if you looked at just the upper deck of the stadium, it looked like a Bills home.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. I don't want to say I felt sorry for them, but I can understand their frustration.
Yeah.
I think like in baseball with the Tampa Rays, and you watch, if the Yankees or Red Sox are playing there,
It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
Right.
Well, and it's been that way the last few years for the Sabres when Toronto comes.
Oh, that's brutal, right?
It's bad.
Yeah,
It's really bad. The Bills play in London this year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can talk people through your experience at the London game. I know we've talked about it a few times, some stories from there. How much of a logistical challenge is it, and how much of it is on the Bills, and how much of it is on the NFL? Does the NFL plan that trip for the Bills? Like the hotel and all, or are you still doing it in-house?
More so than for a regular game, I think. And who are we just talking to this way? Depending on when people are listening to this, I share a story with Matt Beauvais about
he'll be coming on Sunday.
Sunday, right? You essentially move your whole football office. And because when we played in Toronto, I had this responsibility that for some reason they thought I was the person to do it. I had to collect all the passports, and I had a safe in my office because players picked up their pay. That's how it happened.
Okay.
And when they weren't direct deposit yet, if a player didn't pick up their pay every night, I would put it in the safe. Some guys intentionally didn't want to pick up their pay because they were playing this little financial game about if I have it, I'll spend it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I had a safe, so they thought, we put all the passports in the safe, and then I had to, above and beyond that, go. I think there were 3, 4, 5 different times where I had to distribute all the passports, collect them, distribute them, collect them at customs. I had nightmares about it. It's
another one of those jobs you can only mess it up.
Oh, and I kind of did, but I didn't. It got messed up. But when we got to London, one of the players, 2 of them, Jonathan, I had to rush ahead to customs after distributing the passports on the plane back to the players. Now, being a red-eye flight, it was dark.
Oh.
And the players were all in. We had this really nice plane where the players were in seats that laid down. So they slept. They were slept.
Sure.
I had to wake up a lot of the players like an hour before we landed to give them their passports.
Okay.
So then I jumped out. It was Terry Pagula, Kim Pagula, and me and Casey Weidel and Kevin Meegang was already there. He was dancing. So I was there, having given all the passports out, but I had to collect them again. And then one of the players started telling me, Jonathan Meeks doesn't have his passport. Meeks doesn't have his passport. They kept telling me. I'm like, oh, great. Okay. But I had to keep taking theirs. And then I said, we'll do. I know I remember giving it to him. I remember he was one of the sleeping players. And then all of a sudden they kept saying, Hughes doesn't have his passport. I'm like, what? Meeks. No, Jerry Hughes too. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So the team had to leave. They all jumped on buses and went an hour
Did you have
away.
to go through customs?
Oh, yeah.
So you didn't have any special treatment? Was it just like a regular plane landing at Heathrow Airport?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
But, I mean, I think they tried to give us like a gate but, they didn't treat us in any special way. We still had to go through customs. But so they're like, Jerry Hughes, they took his whole seat apart. They found Jonathan Meeks.
Okay.
But the buses were gone. And then Jerry came in, and as I shared with Matt Move, we had to. They said, well, you got to go to Parliament, and you have to lobby in front of a bunch of dudes with wigs on. They didn't say that, but that's what I imagined.
Sure.
and explain to them that you had it when you boarded the plane. We had photocopies, which they said can help a little bit, but it was going to cost £2,500. And then we're there, and then finally, I remember Dave Wheat said, or Jim said, Jerry, just look in your bag one more time. And he opened up, and it just fell out on the floor. He was like, there it is.
What a relief for you.
I almost passed out. In the book, I write about that because
What's the name of your book?
Thunder, Snow, Buffalo, about the October storm. It was about how we had a.
It's available in the Bills store.
Thank you. It was. I don't know if they still have it, but yes. But I didn't name Jerry's name because at the time he was still on the team. Okay. But now that he's off the team, I can say he was the player.
Did he apologize to you?
Oh, kinda. But he's like, hey, how about that? It was there all along. Hey, what do you know?
He didn't realize your sheer terror.
It was too.
Yeah, no. Well, could you imagine if he couldn't play?
Well, that's just it. I'm thinking I'm going to get to the hotel, and Rex is going to be like, are you serious? Our starting defensive end, we're not going to. That's a
terrible
way to go.
It's a terrible duty to have.
It was like, as you've said many times, you can only mess it up.
That's a terrible. That might be like last on the duty draft for an international travel. Like if you did duty draft, okay, and it was everything that you needed to do to get an NFL team to London. To me, because the players, God love them, they're young, they're carefree. Most of them just.
This wasn't my idea.
It was like when I was trying to collect playbooks. Oh, mine's over here, mine's over there. They just, it's like dealing with college students. It's like it's tough. So that would be last in the duty draft. I feel like for you. God, yeah, that's a terrible.
It was horrible. I understood why they did it, and it worked. I have to say, except for that.
Did you have to collect the staffs too, or did staff
coaches and players? That was it.
Okay, so everybody else was on their own.
Everyone else was on their own.
Isn't that interesting? And isn't it funny that they don't trust the coaches and players with their own passport?
It's that, and they are just. We can't not have them there.
Sure, if you lose your passport, sorry, buddy, we'll meet you back in.
You're going to find your own way there, and once you find it,
I guess you figure out who's important and who's not.
Yep.
Based upon that's funny.
Yeah.
So once you're there in London, I mean, how many sightseeing days did you get?
One, and it got cut short. We were there a week. We were an hour north of the city. I was in the office all week, and then finally, we knew on Friday night there was going to be a team event at the Tower of London. Literally, the Pagulas rented out the Tower of London.
There's a joke in there about the team's performance and being in the Tower of London.
We blew the game, but they had a spotlight on the Tower of London with the Bills logo
cool.
on it. It was unbelievable.
That's super cool.
Wow! And then you go down the tower, you see the crown jewel, you see where they tortured people. It was horrible, very creepy. But
was there drought era highlights going on in those torture rooms?
No.
There wasn't like New England game clips just running from like 01, 02, 03.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. They could skip 02, but yeah, every other year.
Fair.
Oh, that would have been right. But the night before, Paul Lancaster, Casey, and Idle went out. We thought we had one night to go down and just see the place on our own. We get on the tube, as they call it, or the train, and Paul gets a text that one of the players, John Miller's, either father or mother passed away. Oh. So we had to go and then come right back immediately because I had his passport. So he had to go home immediately, but he couldn't. So I had to come. We hardly saw anything.
Wow. Okay.
And I came back and we said, "Oh, nice try."
Wow. Yeah. That's tough.
It's okay. I mean, we were there to do a job, and
it's got to be difficult though. You're somewhere great and you can't experience it at all.
Right.
That's tough.
I've been there once before in the early 90s for a preseason game with the Bills, and I saw a lot of the city then because preseason game was, so much less.
Was there any, speaking of that, was there any preseason games that you were at not in an NFL city?
London, Berlin, I want to say Canton.
Okay, for the Hall of Fame.
When Bruce Smith and Mr. Wilson were inducted, we stayed in Canton. We stayed in Cleveland, but the game was in a high school in Canton.
Okay.
There might have been a couple others. I just can't remember.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So before we go here, we're going to do kind of a summary. No, not the Wheel of Fame Bills coaches yet. We're going to do a summary of each of the Bills away games this year.
Okay.
And maybe one memory, thought,
All right.
observation of each city. So these are obviously all the teams that the Bills are going to play on the road. Don't know when, don't know, time frame yet. Philadelphia.
I remember a preseason game, and I took the opportunity to ask someone where the Liberty Bell was, and I went and saw it. It was pretty cool, pretty small, but I remember being with you in Philadelphia.
Do you know what we did there? We watched one of the most famous episodes of television.
Yes,
ever.
Survivor.
It was the finale of the first season of Survivor, where Richard Hatch ended up winning. We watched it at a bar in Philly, not a bar, like a restaurant / bar in Philly.
Yep.
The night before the Bills-Eagles preseason game.
There you go.
It was one of the most famous episodes of television.
Yep, good call. I remember watching the Patriots stay undefeated too. Whatever.
Oh. Bengals, Cincinnati.
Cincinnati's a fine city, but I don't mean to.
Go ahead.
It's one of those cities where
disparage. They beat us in the playoffs last year. Disparage.
It doesn't. It have like a signature feel to it.
Okay.
Like in Miami or where you are.
Sure.
Cincinnati. Am I in Kansas? Where
Cincinnati feels kind of like a big suburb with maybe a couple tall buildings. Right.
The city was legit downtown, but I didn't feel a distinctness about it.
Were you at both stadiums there? Were you ever at Riverfront?
No.
It's just only the new stadium.
Yeah, would have been like 2000.
Which is a nice event. Like it's a nice setting on the river, and the Red Stadium's right next door, right?
Yeah, I think it was 2014 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Commanders.
They were still the Redskins, and they were playing at FedEx Field, which was huge.
I heard that's like the worst stadium in the NFL for a lot of different reasons, like the location of it.
Yeah,
it's real bland.
It's in Virginia, I believe.
Yeah,
it's actually in Virginia, because we got Virginia taxes hit rather than Maryland taxes. And probably the game where Sean Taylor had passed away early in the week, and we talked to Ryan Lindell about this. But,
right.
Where, by all accounts, they had the feel like it's a game they should have won, but we won the game. And Joe Gibbs famously, at least in Bill's playoff drought lore, called the second time out and gave Ryan Lindell 15 more yards, he kicked that game-winning field goal. And the final score was like 15-6 or something. It was all 5 field goals.
What a barn burner!
Something like that.
another Bills drought special.
Yeah.
Right. So you did stay in DC, right? I'm assuming when you played in Washington.
We actually did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Like near the White House?
Right in DC.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
It's an interesting choice.
It was. Yeah, you could see the monument and you could see the
Huh.
Oh, and it was cool because Corey Bennett, who was a former trainer with the Bills, was working for the Washington Wizards. He was their head trainer, and he got Paul and I tickets to the game, like VIP tickets. And then he said, use these passes, come in, and we were eating with the Wizard players. I remember the elevator door opened and George Mirasan walked out. I knew he was 7 foot 7. Tallest person I've ever seen in my life.
Sure.
You couldn't believe what you were seeing. Paul himself was 6'6" or something.
Okay.
And he looked short next to him.
Who'd they play? Do you remember?
Charlotte. It was an NBA game.
I can see why he got the VIP seats. Corey was there. Corey was there when I was there. He's a good dude.
Guy, yeah.
Charlotte is Charlotte. Kansas City Chiefs.
Jack Stacks, barbecue, getting the meat sweats. It is the best,
And it is the loudest
Yeah.
outdoor place I've ever been.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You were there.
I was there.
Yeah.
It was annoying. The chop is horrible.
Yeah.
Everything about it. And I remember the tunnel walking down to the field. Just it's still painted all red. Everything in that stadium is red.
Yeah, you know where you are.
You know where you are
For sure.
And it's a very unique. Being on the sideline and being down, on the field, it's a very unique looking place because the upper deck is like pitched in all four corners. They're like, at an angle.
Yep.
It's a very unique stadium. You know where you are at all times.
Yeah, we got a false sense of hope that year too because we played their opening day and the opening kickoff. We recovered a fumble and we beat them like 55-14 or something crazy. And we're like, oh, here we go. I think Stevie Johnson had a crazy good game. Who, by the way, you've been in contact with Stevie Johnson in talks. It sounds like he's going to come on at some point. Yep.
So the LA Chargers. Were you ever in LA for any game?
For the Rams, not the Chargers. When we played the Chargers, we were in San Diego.
Where were the Rams playing? Sure, it wasn't St. Louis.
Well, I mean, no, I don't. I think they were still in LA, but like when we played the Chargers. I only played them when they were in San Diego.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple things I remember was I remember we watched at night at a Mexican restaurant. Oh man, talk about authentic! And we watched Robert Griffin Jr. win the Heisman there.
Okay.
I know why I remember that. And I remember being on the field. We talked to Mark Honan about this. I got a tap on the shoulder, and it was that actor Bill Fichtner.
Yeah,
he was at the game on the sideline looking for Mark
at Qualcomm Stadium.
Yeah,
that was a dump, right? That stadium.
Yeah, it was.
It was another one of those like multi-purpose,
big
round like veteran stadium.
Underwhelming.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Jets. I know we've had a lot of fun stories about the stadium, but what do you have one?
It was the first regular season game that I had to do the coaches' pictures in the booth.
Yeah, and that's a memory that stuck with you, right?
Once. By that time, we were pretty good at it, but I remember I love their new stadium. That MetLife Stadium is absolutely beautiful.
I've been there. Yep,
really nice.
All right, the Patriots. Can you say anything nice about either Gillette Stadium, about the area, about the fans, maybe the food? Is there anything nice that you could? Is there one person in the organization who did something nice for you? Is there anything nice that you can squeeze out?
Well, it was a house of horrors, obviously. The only time we won there was the year Brady was hurt, and we shut him out. I think Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback, and
that big 16-0 win that Rex was real proud of. Yeah, I remember that.
Yep.
Is that one of your game balls?
I think it is. Yeah, I don't know if I have it up there or not.
No, no, it didn't make the list.
No, it's not up there. But the food's fine. The stadium's decent. I think Mark Gahn talked about it was his worst stadium because of the traffic. You just go through residential areas to get through it. It's a long trip because in Providence, you're already bummed out that you lost. And then the ride from Foxborough to the Providence airport was like 50 minutes, 50. And the flight was only 45 minutes. Like the bus ride was longer than the flight.
So you failed the challenge of saying one nice thing about.
Oh well, I failed.
Okay, failed. All right, so we're gonna end on this and see if you can say anything nice about Miami.
It's the best. Like talking about the fans. There's so many Bills fans, like we talked about. I mean, let's face it, the weather's just great, and team has had over the course of years just a fair amount of success against the Dolphins. It's fun.
That's a much more fun destination than New England.
Yeah,
New England for the places I went, it was just dull. The Marriott in Providence, I remember being kind of dark, and it was. I think we were there mid-October, and the weather was terrible.
Oh, it's brutally hot, right?
No, it's cold. No, I'm talking New England.
Oh, New England.
It was just
sorry.
It was everything about it just felt real like kind of dark and dank, and it got late real early, and it was just depressing. Going to Miami is like it's a vacation. Yeah,
and the team ownership's interesting. I had to be out at the buses to verify that everyone came through and that they were with us or they weren't, to make sure we had everyone accounted for. And man, the players like Jason Taylor's, like, the cars were beautiful, but the owners is like, oh, there's Serena Williams, oh, there's Jennifer Lopez, oh, right. There's just they own the team and they were just around in that area. I remember my daughter's like, are you serious? I'm yeah, they own the team. And
how many? Speaking of your daughter, I was just going to ask you, how many times did your family come on a road trip? Not with the team, but how many times did they ever go to a road game?
with an asterisk. They went to the Toronto game a couple times.
Oh.
Yeah, it wasn't. I told them, Amy went with me to a couple of the preseason games. She went to Super Bowls. They were team family events. But I told her, you go to a game. I don't know. I barely see you.
Right.
You're traveling on your own. That part of it just wasn't all that appealing to them. They'd rather just watch at home.
Yeah, and the novelty of you working there had worn off years before. I mean, you
Yeah.
guys, and if you've done Super Bowls and all, like
Right.
what's a regular season
Right,
game
right.
in Carolina? Like, who's going to go to that, right? Did you ever have anyone meet you, like old friends?
Oh, yeah, a lot.
A bunch of where, like, what do you remember about that?
My friend Anthony would meet me in Tampa or Miami every time. I had family and friends in Denver, Green Bay. That was always cool.
You got to go out to dinner usually.
Yeah, or if it's a preseason game, you had all day, so you go out to breakfast. But if it was the night before, you just see him for a couple hours at dinner, and that was always fun.
Do you remember when we went to Shula's Steakhouse in Detroit? And the woman illuminated my steak with the little flashlight.
I do.
I knew that's when I knew I made the big time. I'm like, you know what? I've never been to a restaurant before where someone cut my steak open and shined a flashlight in it to show me the tenderness of the inside. And I'm like, wow, now I've made it. Like I my friend Chris met us at Shula's Steakhouse out because they were playing in the Silverdome then, not Ford Field. They were building Ford Field, but we still went to the Silver. And remember, the Silverdome smelled so much like popcorn. Do you remember that?
Yeah, no.
So the domes with the inflatable roof.
Right.
Did I ever tell you this story? We're leaving the Silverdome after the game's over, preseason game. Everybody's relaxed. Everybody's having a good time. I couldn't tell you whether we won or lost. We're leaving the Silverdome, and there's a tunnel that goes down. They had a tunnel there that went down, kind of similar to the Bills tunnel.
It's on a slope.
Slope. Yep. The whole thing was on a slope. And then they have the doors.
Yep.
And then they've got the sliding or the revolving door. Well, John Butler decides that he's going to stand near the door. He sees me coming out with my bag, and he's like, the circular door is broken. Go out this door. Well, I push the door open, and it's vacuum sealed, the entire door.
Oh.
I got sucked out the door, and I went flying about 8 feet. And he's like, rookie. He got the biggest kick out of the back. He totally set me up. He stood in front of the circular door, and I think he kind of held a couple people back,
right,
so that I didn't see anybody going through the circular door.
You were hazed, right?
I was totally hazed, and I literally got sucked like right out, and I fell. And he thought it was like the funniest thing. And of course, what am I going to say, Mr. Butler? Thanks for your time, right? Like, what are you going to say?
You got me.
Yeah. Before we finish, we're going to do Don's favorite tradition of spinning the wheel of failed Bills coaches.
Let her rip.
So the wheel landed on Anthony Lynn.
Anthony Lynn. Yeah, he he was the running backs coach, I think, under Rex.
And then interim head coach, right?
Interim head coach, right? Yeah, we thought he was going to have a chance to stay on, but before that, I remember we had to literally pay for movers to come, and when it was his time to move, he called me one day on a Saturday. He's like, they didn't show up. And
move to Buffalo?
Yeah, to Buffalo. Well, what am I going to do? I was supposed to go to my apartment. And so I remember it was a Saturday morning, and I had to go and meet with him. And we got it worked out. But then he, real personable guy, interim coach for the last 3 years after who was let go?
Rex.
Yeah, that's right. Right. And we were rooting for him to be successful. He came to my office and said, "Hey, when we do travel next year, I'm going to make some changes. Can we have a meeting to talk about it?" I thought it was interesting because it was unnecessarily early.
Okay.
But
he thought he was going to get the job.
Yeah, and that's how much he said. I really want to talk to you about some things while they're fresh. And then he did get a head coaching job with the Chargers. Had like one good year and then a real not good year. They were
maddening.
Yeah,
they were maddening. They kept having the same like clock management issues,
situational.
So clearly the Bills made the correct choice moving on and who they hired.
Yeah. he was, by all accounts, a good running back coach, maybe even offense coordinator. Head coach just it's a different animal.
Right. Well, I really appreciate everybody listening today. Hopefully everybody enjoyed kind of our first episode in a while, just you and I.
Yep.
We have Matt Beauvais from WKBW coming on Sunday. He's going to talk about his really interesting interview with Mike North from the NFL and about the schedule. And then his career, his journey, and some of what goes into being a beat reporter, sports director locally.
That's good.
And then next week we're going to be interviewing Drew Haddad and Naaman Roosevelt, two guys who both had kind of really unique paths to the Bills, UB guys. I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to those guys and seeing what it's like to be 7th round pick, a UDFA coming in. We also have Kristen Kimmick, who is the founder and president of the Bills Mafia Babes, something that my wife is a part of on Facebook, and apparently I'm not allowed to join because I'm male. So we're going to talk to her about her great mission. They do a lot with Del Reed and 26 Shirts.
Oh, right.
They've raised quite a bit of money already for charity.
Cool.
And I'm always fascinated by these fan groups. And I know that you have a couple of guys that you're in talks with, which I appreciated from your contract negotiating days.
Well, we started this program talking about the best interceptions, and it looks like we're going to have the candidates on there. Sam Adams, Drayton Florence, Robert Royal's going to come on at some point. He's not one of those guys. He's a tight end. John Fina was talking to you about coming on. And
we're working on Stevie Johnson, and
right.
we know that we're going to have him on in the next few weeks, and a bunch of different guys, a bunch of different stories. People from all different, obviously all different aspects of Bills Mafia here.
Our first current front office member of the Bills, Andy Major, who's VP of Guest Services, I think, and more.
Yeah, I'm interested to talk to him about what he has seen in his tour of stadiums. To build the new stadium, you go around to all the other stadiums and see what you like, what you don't like.
He did that.
I would do that for free.
Yeah, right?
What a great job.
Yeah.
I wonder, did he go mostly during events, or was he touring them when nobody was there?
He went to road games. Like he would come on the road with us, and
what a great
for the
gig.
purpose of going to the game and talking to their people.
That is the opposite of holding the passports.
You're right.
That would be like the top of the duty draft. Check out all the cool things at this stadium.
Yep.
Yeah, sign me up. Hold everybody's passport. No, hell no.
No, you're right. He wins.
What a great gig.
Yeah, he's got a great job, and it's going to be a lot of fun to talk with him. We'll see. He probably won't be able to talk too much about with the current stadium. We'll see, but he can at least talk about what his favorite things were about other stadiums, which would seem, if he banked it, you would like to think he would want to do the same stuff.
All right, we'll see everybody on Sunday to talk to Matt Beauvais.
All right,
thanks.